I wasn't going to let anyone in. That was the decision I'd made somewhere around the third month after Diane left, standing in my kitchen at 11 at night, eating cold, leftover pasta straight from the container, because I hadn't had the energy to heat it up. Cora was asleep in the next room. I could hear her breathing through the baby monitor I still kept on the counter even though she was 6 years old and didn't need it anymore. I kept it because I needed it, because some nights that small sound was the only thing that felt real. I drove a forklift for a lumber yard out in Harlan County, 42 hours a week, sometimes 45. The pay was decent enough, not good, but decent, enough for our apartment on Ridgemont, enough for groceries, enough for Cora's after-school program at the Y-Mont. Enough for groceries, enough for Cora's after-school program at the Y. Not enough for anything else, but I'd stopped thinking in terms of anything else a long time ago. Cora had stopped talking in October. Not completely. She'd say yes and no. She'd say she was hungry, she was tired, she had to go to the bathroom. The functional things. But the rest of it, the stories she used to tell me at dinner, the questions she asked about everything, the little commentary she'd run under her breath while she drew at the kitchen table, all of that just stopped. Her teacher, Ms. Fontaine, called me in November and said she was concerned. I said I was concerned, too. The school counselor used words like selective mutism and grief response and adjustment period. I took notes. I nodded. I drove home and sat in the parking lot for 10 minutes before I went inside because I didn't know how to walk through that door and not show her how scared I was. She was 6. She'd watched her mother pack 2 suitcases and load them into a car driven by a man none of us had ever met. She was 6, and she saw that and she went quiet, and I didn't blame her for one single second. I had a buddy, Terrence, who worked with me at the yard. He'd been through a divorce himself, came out the other side, remarried, seemed happy. He was always nudging me. "You got to get back out there," he'd say. "You're 38 years old, man. You got a lot of life left." I'd nod and change the subject. I wasn't interested in getting back out there. Out there had done enough damage. What I was interested in was Cora, getting her through, getting both of us through. The after-school program at the Y ran until 5:30. I got off at 4, so I had a little time most days, enough to stop at the grocery store, get home, start something for dinner before I had to go pick her up. That was the routine. I liked the routine. Routinies don't surprise you. It was a Tuesday in February when everything changed. A Tuesday, which is maybe the most ordinary day of the week, which I think is part of why it caught me so off guard. I was at the Kroger on Madison. I remember exactly what was in my cart: a rotisserie chicken, a bag of baby carrots, a box of macaroni and cheese that Cora liked, a half-gallon of milk, and the thing of dish soap. I was looking at the dish soap options for longer than any man should look at dish soap because I'd grabbed the wrong kind the week before and Cora had told me the smell was wrong. She'd said it quietly, barely above a whisper, but she'd said it, and I'd held on to it. She cared about how the dish soap smelled. That meant something. I don't know what it meant exactly, but it meant something. I was standing there holding 2 different bottles when I heard it. "No," I said, "no. Put it back." A woman's voice. Low, controlled, the kind of voice that's used to being listened to. I looked up without thinking about it and saw her 2 aisles over, past the end cap of cereal boxes. She was tall, dark-haired, dressed in the kind of clothes that don't belong in a Kroger in Harlan County on a Tuesday afternoon. A coat that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Leather gloves tucked into her pocket. She was holding the hand of a little boy, maybe 7 or 8, who was reaching back toward a shelf of cookies with the absolute focused desperation that only children can manage. The boy wasn't crying. He wasn't throwing a fit. He was just reaching, silently, with everything he had. She said no again, softer this time, and he stopped reaching. Just stroked his hand and looked at the floor. Something about that got me. I don't know why. Kids give up on things all the time, but the way he did it. No argument, no negotiation, just immediate surrender. It was like he already knew that pushing wasn't worth it. Like he'd learned that a long time ago. I grabbed the dish soap that smelled like lavender because Cora liked flowers, put it in my cart, and minded my own business. I saw them again at the checkout. The woman was ahead of me, unloading her basket onto the belt. The boy stood beside her, very still, looking at nothing in particular. He had the same quality Cora had lately, present in body, somewhere else entirely in every other way. The cashier said something to him. Some cheerful thing cashiers say to kids. I didn't catch exactly what. He didn't respond, didn't look up. The woman answered for him quickly, smoothly, the way you do when you've been answering for someone for long enough that it's become automatic. I know that move. I'd been doing it for 4 months. I loaded my groceries onto the belt and I wasn't going to say anything. I wasn't. But then the boy turned and looked at my cart and his eyes went to the box of macaroni and cheese, and for just a second, the smallest fraction of a second, something in his face changed, like a window that opens and closes before you can get a good look inside. I said, without planning to say it, "Best kind. My daughter's very serious about that one specifically." He looked up at me, not at my cart, at me. His mother turned. She had dark eyes and she was looking at me the way you look at someone who's just done something unexpected in public, not threatened but alert, assessing. I wasn't trying to impress anyone. I wasn't trying to start anything. I said what I said because it was true and because something in that kid's face made me want to say something true to him. "She'd been eating it since she was 4, I said. Has strong opinions." He didn't say anything, but he didn't look away either. His mother said quietly, "He doesn't usually respond to strangers." "That's all right," I said. "I'm not expecting anything." I meant it. I turned back to my groceries and finished loading them. I paid. I put my bags in the cart and headed for the door. I didn't think about it again until I was in the parking lot and I heard footsteps behind me, quick ones, and then her voice. "Excuse me." I stopped and turned around. She was there, the boy beside her, both of them slightly out of breath. She had a look on her face I couldn't read. Not quite hesitant, not quite certain. "He asked me to come after you," she said. I looked at the boy. He was watching me with that same, still, careful attention. "He asked," I said. "He doesn't ask for much," she said, and the way she said it wasn't proud. It was the opposite of proud. It was a woman reporting a fact that cost her something every time she repeated it. Her name was Sylvia Marchetti. I didn't know who she was at the time. I didn't find out until much later. She told me her name in that parking lot, and I told her mine, Owen Hartley. And we stood there for a minute in the February cold, 2 people with nothing in common, except that we both had a kid who'd gone quiet on us. The boy's name was Felix. He stood beside his mother and looked at me, and I didn't try to talk to him. I didn't crouch down to his level and do the voice people do with kids. I just stood there and let him look. "He's been having a hard year," Sylvia said. "His father passed away 14 months ago." "I'm sorry," I said, and then, because it seemed relevant and I didn't see a reason to hide it, "My daughter had a rough fall. She went pretty quiet, too. She's starting to come back around." "What helped?" she asked. It was a direct question, more direct than I expected, and I thought about it honestly before I answered. "I stopped trying to fix it," I said. Stopped asking her how she felt and started just being in the room with her. Doing regular things. Letting it be quiet when it needed to be quiet. Sylvia looked at me for a moment. "That sounds simple." "It doesn't feel simple," I said. She nodded. She understood. I could tell she understood because she didn't say anything after that. Just stood there in agreement. Felix was looking at my bags, specifically at the bag where the macaroni box was visible through the plastic. "Do you want to write down a brand or something?" she asked, a little awkwardly. "Annie's," I said, "but Cora says the Kroger brand is just as good." She ran a comparison. Felix looked up at me again, and he did something I wasn't expecting. He almost smiled. Not quite, but almost. The corner of his mouth moved. I felt something shift. Not in me exactly, around me. The way the air changes before weather. We exchanged numbers in the parking lot in a way that felt like exchanging notes in a meeting, practical and slightly uncomfortable, and then I drove to the Y and picked up Cora and made dinner and went to bed. But I thought about that kid the rest of the week. That almost smile, the way he'd asked his mother to come after me without saying a word. Sylvia texted 2 days later, short, formal. Felix had asked about the mac and cheese man. She didn't know what to do with that information, and she was apparently someone who dealt with not knowing what to do by moving toward it rather than away from it. I texted back and said he was welcome to ask. It took 3 more weeks before we met for coffee. Sylvia's idea, a place called Brickwork downtown that I'd never been to and probably would never have gone to on my own. She was already there when I arrived. Felix was not. He was with a woman named Constance, who I gathered was some combination of nanny and household manager, a role that seemed to cover a lot of territory. I ordered a plain coffee. Sylvia ordered something complicated and then looked at me in a way that made me feel like she'd already assessed 7 different things before I'd finished sitting down. "I should tell you who I am," she said, "because it's relevant and because I'd rather you hear it from me." I said okay. Sylvia Marchetti was the CEO of a real estate development company her late husband Daniel had built from a regional firm into a national one. She'd been running it alongside him for 12 years and had been running it alone for the last 14 months. The company had offices in 4 cities. She had an estimated net worth that got written about in business journals. She had a board of directors who'd been gently and then less gently suggesting she stabilize her personal situation, which was their way of saying she needed a partner, visible and presentable, for the sake of optics and investor confidence. She told me all of this the way someone reads a legal document aloud, not because she was proud of it, because she wanted me to know what I was dealing with. "Okay," I said when she finished. She looked at me like she was waiting for something else. "Is there more?" I asked. Most people have more of a reaction. "I drive a forklift," I said. "I don't have much stake in your investor optics." She almost smiled, almost the same way Felix almost had. I noticed the resemblance right then and tucked it away. We talked for almost 2 hours. She asked about Cora, not in a polite way, in a genuine way. The way you ask when you actually want the answer. I asked about Felix, and she told me about the 14 months. The therapists. The selective mutism diagnosis. The specialists who spoke to her in careful, measured topes about timelines and interventions and realistic expectations. She told me about the birthday party where Felix had stood in the middle of 20 of his school friends and not made a single sound for 2 hours, and how she'd stood in the doorway watching and not known what to do, which was a feeling she was not accustomed to. "I'm very good at knowing what to do," she said. "In most areas of my life, I'm very good at it." "I know the feeling of not being good at the one area that matters most," I said. She looked at her coffee cup. "Yes, I imagine you do." I paid for my coffee. She let me, which I appreciated, say you didn't make a thing of it. We walked out together and she said, "Felix wants to know if you'd be willing to meet him somewhere that isn't a parking lot." I said yes. We took the kids to a nature center out on the east side, the kind of place with walking trails and live animals and habitat enclosures. Cora was immediately everywhere, asking questions of every volunteer she could find, which is what Cora does when she's in a new place that interests her. Felix walked with me, not with his mother, which I only noticed because Sylvia dropped back about 10 feet after the first trail and let it happen. He didn't say much. He pointed at things occasionally. A hawk. A turtle on a rock. Once, a cloud formation that looked vaguely like a dog. He'd point, and I'd say what I saw, and he'd either agree with a nod or tilt his head in the way that meant he saw something different. "You see something else in that one," I said, pointing at the cloud. He looked at me. Then he looked at the cloud. Then he said, very quietly, "Rabbit." I looked. "Okay, yeah, with a cloud that might be a carrot." He looked at me again, and this time he did smile. Not almost, all the way. I didn't make a big deal of it. I didn't call back to Sylvia. I just said, "Good eye," and we kept walking. Sylvia caught up to us about 10 minutes later and fell into step beside me. She didn't say anything. I didn't say anything. Kara came running back from 50 yards ahead to show us a moth she'd found on a fence post. Felix looked at the moth with the same careful, total attention he gave everything else. "It's a Luna moth," Cora announced, which may or may not have been accurate. Felix reached out one finger and touched the fence post about an inch away from the moth. Not the moth itself, just near it, like a test. "It won't fly," Cora told him, with the authority of someone who'd decided. "They only fly at night." Felix looked at her. She looked back at him. Some kind of understanding passed between them that I could not have explained if you'd asked me to. 2 kids, who'd each had a hard year, standing in front of a moth on a fence post on a cold Saturday in March. I started to understand what the word "see" really meant somewhere around the 4th time we got together. Not a date, we never called them dates, not for a long time, just meetings. The Nature Center, a children's museum downtown. Once my kitchen where I made chili from scratch because Sylvia mentioned that Felix had eaten half a bowl of it at his grandmother's house the previous month, and it was the most he'd eaten at a single sitting in weeks. She'd said it offhand. She probably didn't think I'd heard it as significant. I heard it as significant. He ate a full bowl. He asked for crackers by pointing at the cabinet. Second shelf, I told him without turning from the stove. The saltines. He got them himself. I didn't turn around. I kept stirring the chili. I heard the cabinet open, heard him climb down off the counter because of course he climbed, heard the crinkle of the wrapper. Cora was at the table working on a drawing she'd been doing for 3 days. She looked up when he sat down and pushed her colored pencils toward the center of the table without comment. An offering. Felix took a red one. Sylvia was standing in the doorway, watching all of this, with a look on her face that I recognized because I'd had it myself, watching Cora do something ordinary, just completely ordinary, something she'd done 1,000 times before she went quiet, and feeling it like a fist around your heart. The ordinary things, when they come back like that. I don't know exactly when it changed between Sylvia and me. I know it wasn't a moment, it was an accumulation of moments. The time she showed up at the lumberyard on a Thursday because she'd been driving past and wanted to tell me something she didn't want to text. The time I called her at 9 at night because Cora had asked me, out of nowhere, if she was ever going to see her mother again. And I hadn't known what to say. And I needed to talk to someone who would understand what kind of question that was. The time she helped Cora with a school project about animals, and got so genuinely interested in the research that they were still at the kitchen table when Felix fell asleep on my couch, and I had to carry him out to her car. "You're good with him," she said, standing by the car in the dark while I buckled him into the back seat. "He's easy to be good with," I said, "once you understand what he needs." "What does he need?" "Same thing most people need," I said, "to not have to perform, to just be there without anyone expecting anything from it." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "No one has ever said that to me before. About him." 14 months of therapists and nobody said it? "They said it differently," she said. "It sounded like a technique, the way you said it sounded like." She stopped. "Like I meant it," I said. "Like you meant it," she agreed. "I meant it." The board of directors thing came up in April. Sylvia told me about it in a way that was factual and removed, like she was briefing a colleague, because I think that was how she protected herself when something was actually hard. There were people in her professional life, board members, a few senior investors, her late husband's former business partner, who believed she needed to demonstrate personal stability. She'd been resisting the implication. She found it offensive, but the pressure was building, and there was an annual investor dinner in May that she'd been dreading. "They want to see that you're not alone," I said. "They want to see that I'm manageable," she said, "that I have someone who will keep me reasonable." "That's insulting." "Yes." She said it without heat. "It is." "What are you going to do?" She looked at me for a long time. "I've been thinking about going alone," she said. "I've been thinking about telling them to mind their own business. I've also been thinking." She stopped. Started again. "Felix asked about you yesterday. Specifically, he asked if you were going to come over on Saturday." "I can come over on Saturday," I said. "He's asked about you every day this week." I let that sit there. "I'm not telling you that to make you feel pressured," she said. "I know," I said. "I'm telling you because it seems like information you should have." "I know," I said again. "It does." The investor dinner was black tie at the Harlan Grand, which is the kind of hotel that doesn't exist in a place like Harlan County except it does, a relic of better economic times, still running on reputation and very good light fixtures. Sylvia asked me to come about a week before, and I said yes without overthinking it. I rented a suit. Terrence helped me pick it out because Terrence has opinions about suits. He was very serious about the whole thing. "This is a big deal," he told me. "It's a dinner," I said. "It's not a dinner," he said. "You know it's not a dinner." I knew it was not a dinner. Sylvia was composed the entire evening. She introduced me to people as Owen and said I was a good friend, and let the implication sit there without elaborating. I talked to her board members about things I knew, logistics, supply chains, the way material cost had shifted since the pandemic, things that applied to lumber and probably applied to real estate development if you looked sideways at them. One of the board members, a man named Clifton, who'd been making Sylvia's life difficult for about 6 months, spent 20 minutes talking to me about load-bearing structural calculations, and by the end he seemed genuinely pleased. I don't know what he expected. I don't know what any of them expected. A forklift operator at a black-tie dinner is an unusual thing, and I knew I was an unusual thing in that room, and I'd made peace with that on the drive over. What I hadn't made peace with was how I felt watching Sylvia work that room. She was remarkable. There's no other word for it. She moved through people like she understood exactly what each one needed and could provide it with perfect economy. The right word at the right moment. Nothing wasted, nothing performed. I'd known she was capable. I hadn't understood the scale of it. I told her that in the elevator on the way down to the lobby at the end of the night. "You are watching me work," she said. "Yes." "Why does that make you look like that?" "Like what?" She looked at me. "Like you're impressed, but you're not going to say you're impressed." "I'm going to say it," I said. "I just also feel like I should warn you that it's going to sound inadequate because I don't have the vocabulary for what I watched you do in there tonight." She laughed. Really laughed, not the controlled version, not the managed version, just a real laugh in a hotel elevator, and then she put her hand on my arm and kept it there. Felix was awake when we got to her house. Constance met us at the door with a look that said she'd tried and failed to get him to sleep. He was on the couch in his pajamas with a book about ocean animals open on his lap, even though it was after 10:30. He looked up when we came in. He looked at his mother, then at me. "Hey, bud," I said. He held the book up toward me, a page about bioluminescent jellyfish. "Those are wild," I said. "They light up their own dark." He looked at the picture. Then he said, "Like a nightlight." "Exactly like a nightlight," I said. Sylvia sat down next to him on the couch. She put her arm around him and he leaned into her in a way that was automatic and complete, the way kids lean when they feel completely safe. She looked up at me over his head and she was not composed. She was not composed at all, and she wasn't trying to be. I sat down on the armchair across from them. Felix held the book up again, open to a different page, a deep-sea fish with a light on its head. "Anglerfish," I said. He nodded. We sat there like that for a while, him and his mother and me, in the good quiet. Not the hard kind. Not the kind that closes in on you at 11 at night eating cold pasta. The other kind. The kind that has enough room in it. He fell asleep around 11 with the book still open. Sylvia and I sat for a while after that and didn't say much, and what we did say wasn't about anything in particular. It was the kind of talking you do when you're not trying to accomplish anything with words, when you're just there, in the same room, on the same night. She told me later that she'd decided something while we were sitting there. I asked her what. She said she'd decided she was done managing the situation. Done being strategic about it. Done treating it like a problem she was solving rather than something that was just happening, real and impractical, and not subject to board approval. She didn't ask me anything that night. There was nothing to ask exactly, because some things don't need to be put in the form of a question. What I can tell you is this. I came back the next Saturday and the one after that. Felix asked me the third Saturday if I wanted to see his room. I said yes. He showed me every significant object in it, a rock collection, a model of the solar system that was missing Mercury, a drawing of a dog he said he was going to get someday. He told me these things in his careful, quiet way, not performing, not explaining himself, just sharing what was important to him in the plain way that children do when they trust you. Cora and Felix started sitting at the kitchen table together with a kind of regularity that became its own kind of routine. She'd bring her drawings. He'd bring her drawings. He'd bring his books. They didn't talk much. They didn't need to. Sometimes the thing that saves you doesn't arrive in any form you expected. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't look like rescue. It looks like a Tuesday at a Kroger, and a kid almost smiling over a box of macaroni and cheese, and you standing there holding dish soap, not expecting a thing. I wasn't going to let anyone in. That was the decision I'd made. I'm glad I'm not always the one who gets to decide. I still think about that parking lot sometimes. February cold, grocery bags in my hands, and a woman I'd never met chasing me down because her son, a boy who hadn't asked for much of anything in over a year, had asked for that, just that, to find the man with the macaroni. There's something I've come to understand about the way life responds to the kind of person you choose to be, not in a mystical sense, in a plain, observable, cause and effect sense. I was honest with Felix from the first moment because it cost me nothing to be honest with a kid who wasn't asking for performance. I didn't try to impress him. I didn't try to fix him. I just said what was true, that my daughter had strong opinions about pasta, and something in him recognized that as real. Kids who've been through loss have very accurate radar for what's real. They've had to develop it. That's the first thing I'd tell anyone coming out of a hard stretch. The most important thing you can do is just keep being decent when it doesn't benefit you. Not for reward, not because someone's watching. Owen kept driving the forklift, kept picking Cora up at 5:30, kept choosing dish soap based on how it smelled, not because it was building toward anything, but because that's who he was. And who you are when nothing is happening is exactly who shows up when everything suddenly is. The second thing is about the intelligence to actually see what's in front of you. Sylvia had every resource in the world and 14 months of specialist appointments, and what finally reached Felix wasn't a technique or a framework. It was someone paying attention to what he actually needed rather than what the situation was supposed to require. I noticed the almost smile. I noticed the way he looked at the macaroni box. I noticed when he climbed down from the counter to get the crackers himself, and I stayed at the stove because the moment didn't need me to turn around and make it into something. Knowing when to act and when to just let a thing breathe, that's a kind of intelligence that doesn't come from credentials. It comes from watching carefully and caring enough to adjust. The third thing is the one that's hardest to talk about, and it's this: staying steady when it's not working yet. Those 4 months before the parking lot, when Cora was quiet and I was scared and Terrence kept telling me to get back out there, I didn't fold. I didn't make decisions out of desperation. I stayed in the routine because the routine was what Cora needed, and what she needed mattered more than what I was afraid of. That kind of endurance isn't dramatic. Nobody writes about it. But it's the thing underneath everything else. You can't get to the parking lot moment if you didn't survive all the Tuesday nights before it. Felix grabbed my hand eventually, in his way on his timeline, because I never once asked him to. Cora pushed her colored pencils across the table without being told. Those two kids found each other in the quiet, the way people do when no one's performing for anyone. I wasn't trying to build a family. I was just trying to be a person worth building one with. Turns out that's enough.